and welcome to Wrestling and Everything Coast to Coast with your host, Buddy Sotelo, Esquire, Dr. Mike Leno, and Evan Ginsberg. Would you like to introduce our guest for tonight? Either one of you guys.
Because I contacted him to do the show. He did a fantastic job. He's been on all the media, but I heard him on Busted Open a couple of weeks ago. Dr. Jeremy Housewright, the new book, and it's unique because it's on fans. It's called For the Love of the Show, Pro Wrestling Fans Tell Their Stories. I just sent my reviews to Amazon and Barnes & Noble, but For the Love of the Show, Pro Wrestling Fans Tell Their Stories. And Jeremy, I guess tell us about, you're in the St. Louis area, historic, and Evan Ginsberg here, major historian. He's put out several books. He and I are doing the John Tolis book together, but he came in to help me for days before my St. Louis Sam Munchnick weekend, the 3-day weekend that I told you about from May of 1992, so we can get into St. Louis history. But Jeremy, this is a unique topic because a lot of us, I'm winding it up, a lot of us really respect wrestlers when we learn that they were fans growing up, or refs or announcers like Justin Roberts, a fan since he was like 3 years old. And a lot of fans have turned wrestling into cottage industries. Like I'm listening to Ted DiBiase's podcast, Everybody's Got a Podcast. Well, almost every fan has a podcast now. And so how did this, well, tell us about yourself first of all, and then we'll get into the book, which is terrific.
Well, I guess I'm from St. Louis, been near St. Louis all my life. Grew up in Columbia, Illinois, 10 minutes from St. Louis. So I spent all my childhood in St. Louis. We're in St. Louis Cardinals country, and that's probably the big downfall because I'm not a St. Louis Cardinals fan at all. And so I'm kind of the outcast, and being a Kansas City Chiefs diehard fan since I was 10 years old.
Boo! Boo! Okay, this interview has ended right now.
But congrats to both teams, because I can't wait. It's going to be a hell of a Super Bowl next week. The Taylor Swift Super Bowl. The Trump people call foul. It's going to be very politically, entertainment-wise interesting.
Yeah, it seems like the only people who dislike the Chiefs are 49er fans and Trumpers. So
no, don't put me in that. I'm not in that, category. I'm in the first category, not the second.
But I grew up here in St. Louis, and growing up, I spent a lot of time with my grandfather. He took me to all my wrestling shows as a kid. We would go over to the Kiel Auditorium, which is now Stiefel Theater here in St. Louis. But we would go, probably starting. I got the original ticket stubs from my first few shows. I guess probably in '87 we started going when I was 6, and we would go anytime they came on a Friday or Saturday night for house shows. And we'd go there. We'd go over to the arena, the Checker Dome is what they called it, and where the Blues used to play. And we'd go because I was a Hulk Hogan fan as a kid. I grew up watching Hogan, and all my early memories of wrestling involve Hulk Hogan. I guess probably I first saw him on Rocky III, and was instantly a fan, larger than life figure, and, say your prayers, eat your vitamins, all that stuff. So it was a great role model to have as a kid. Now as an adult, I might think a little bit different of him, but still I'll tell anybody, pro wrestling would not be where it is today without Hulk Hogan. So I do give him that respect. But growing up here, I went to SIU.
Being from St. Louis, I would have expected you to be a Bruiser Brody fan.
He was before my. I know a lot about Brody now, but he was before my time. I never saw him in anything until probably I was a teenager. I would come home from school, 7th and 8th grade, and watch ESPN, and they had old, I guess it was like AWA, NWA stuff on. So I saw the Von Erichs and Bruiser and all them guys. But no, I went to school for journalism at Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville, and graduated from there and got a sports writer job right away out of school. And then that was right when the internet boom was starting. So I saw the writing on the wall for a lot of the newspapers, and decided to go back to school. And for some odd reason, I decided to go into education and became a teacher. And so I've been involved in education now 16 years. I got my doctorate in 2019. And I still write. I am the editor of a website, reviewstl.com, and I also contribute to a few other sites. So I do a lot of entertainment writing, musicians, actors, comedians, and the WWE and I've been fortunate to have a good relationship with them now, where I shoot anytime they come to town for probably about the last 8 years, and now the last 3 years I've been traveling to WrestleManias, Royal Rumbles, SummerSlams, and shooting those shows and interviewing a lot of the talent. So, yeah, just a huge sports fan overall. And but wrestling's definitely probably next to the Chiefs. It's my number 1A, I guess I'd call it. Of what I'm into.
Let's go to Evan, because Evan is taught. He teaches ESL. He teaches tons of stuff, and co-producer of The Wrestler with Mickey Rourke. Ev, let's bring you aboard.
I was the associate producer of The Wrestler, which is basically I was the wrestling guy, not the money guy. Yeah. So I've also worked as a teacher, adult English second language with immigrants from all over the world. So I really do not appreciate the xenophobia that's rampant in America these days. Don't build a wall. America was built on immigrants, including my grandparents and probably yours. So with that out of the way.
Well, that tells
Jeremy.
Wrestling has been so accepting of other cultures, and like even Pat Patterson, none of the boys cared in the 70s when they knew he was gay. Now, so wrestling can be more inclusive than what's going on right now. So
sure.
I think
that's fascinating that you were an associate producer with The Wrestler. I actually have that poster over here on the left on my wall.
There you go. I appreciate it.
Yeah, big fan of that movie. I love the fact that like R-Truth and some of those guys were in it. Some of the indie guys. I thought that was pretty cool.
Evan got them into the movie.
Yeah, I brought R-Truth in. He super nice guy, and I did a lot of casting for The Wrestlers. I did half dozen or so casting calls, and it was a great.
You were in the band scene. You were in the band convention scene too.
Yeah, I acted with Mickey in the movie also.
Okay.
So I don't have the same love of WWE as Jeremy does because of obvious reasons with Vince and the obscene ticket prices and greed. But I do appreciate when a Seth Rollins wrestles a Cody Rhodes and they create art and and such. But in general, I think the negatives outweigh the positives as far as WWE, at least in 2024. The most recent WWE card at Madison Square Garden was priced $63 to $479. So you've totally outpriced the middle class.
Yes.
So at some point, I don't know how somebody's going to have the experiences that Jeremy or myself had when we were younger, where it was affordable to go to a card. And I'm not going to limit it to WWE. AEW, their last pay-per-view I was actually at, it was $36 to $497 a ticket. And it was a mediocre show, World's End. So
but that's why the indies have better shot at surviving right now and maybe becoming more popular because they are delivering a lot of quality entertainment for the dollar compared to what you're getting at the AEW or WWE shows.
For $10, $20, $30, you can go to an indie show, meet the wrestlers. Some of these guys eventually will be in WWE or AEW. You know how many times I saw Eddie Kingston on indie shows in New York? It's like you're seeing the future superstars on indie cards. So I'll tell you a little tidbit. My oldest friend, he's also a dentist like Mike, and his nephew, just by sheer coincidence, had the same birthday as me. 365 to 1 odds of that, and we're all very close. So throughout this kid's childhood, we took him to Ring of Honor at the Hammerstein, and we took him to indie shows. We never took him to WWE. So this kid thinks like we do. He's like when you take somebody to see Bryan Danielson against Nigel McGuinness, you're not going to settle for going through the motions on a corporate wrestling show. And I sat through 16 matches at World's End for about 4 or 5 hours, and about 3 were really worth seeing.
Yep.
But I want to say last night's Collision was a damn good show. The Hechicero match with Bryan Danielson, if you haven't seen him from CMLL. And I want to bring this back to, Jeremy's book. Dr. Jeremy Housewright is our guest. For the love of the show, Pro Wrestling Fans Tell Their Stories. And Ed and I have been pouring through old programs and stuff, different territories. But for example, I've been looking at St. Louis, Kansas City ticket prices in the 70s, same as LA ticket prices. They were like $3.50 for kids. So any fan could come. $5 for adults. When they brought in the world champion, the ticket prices went to an ungodly $7.50 for Jack Briscoe, Dory Funk Jr., Harley Race, Gene Kiniski. And it made it affordable for the fans. And, and the indies are kind of like that, now more fan friendly. I mean, you just look back at fan friendly in the 70s, 80s, the Jarrett territory in Memphis, where it was the first one where the guys had vendor tables. I can recall ever. I didn't see that at the Sportatorium with the Von Erichs, although they would mingle with the crowd at intermission, which I didn't see really anywhere else, and you could get autographs. But on the fan side, as we were talking about, a lot of fans have, grown. I think the podcaster, I can't think of his name now, who's, he married Flair, one of Flair's daughters.
Conrad.
Yeah, Conrad Thompson. And went from being a fan like so many others to, I'm sure he's a mega millionaire, and so many others have done that with wrestling. So tell us, Jeremy, you went through a lot of effort. You went all over the place to interview these folks. What was the process? How did you get the idea to do this? Because I can't really recall anybody doing a dedicated book out of the millions of books that we all have on the fans and their interesting stories.
So I guess I'd been wanting to write a book for a while, and I just didn't know what topic to choose. I had toyed with some fiction ideas, and I'm not a fiction guy. I only read nonfiction for the most part, and biographies and things like that. So I'm like, whatever I write, it's going to have to be nonfiction. And, when I started traveling to go to these different shows, I would meet different people. And for instance, I went to the All In show in Chicago a few years back and met a couple guys from Los Angeles. And we became buddies, and we would meet up once or twice a year at different shows around the country. The same with a friend I met at WrestleMania 33. He's from Canada. He actually traveled to my house and stayed with me for a week, and I took him up to a Chiefs game because he's a Seahawks fan, and I had to show him who the best fans in football really are. And the loudest stadium.
You're pushing it, my friend. You're continuing to push the edge here.
Jeremy doesn't know Russell's in San Francisco. My wife and I moved from LA, lived up there 40 years. So Russ and I are San Francisco fans, but I also can appreciate the Chiefs and everything Mahomes and company have done. So it's going to be a great Super Bowl next week.
It should be. Yeah, it should be.
Let's leave it at that. I mean, we love the NFL. There we go.
So I thought, I'm meeting these different guys, and we would literally talk every day, every other day through a message chain about wrestling. And I thought, it's kind of neat that I've met these guys and thought about some of the crazy stories I had gotten involved with when traveling. A couple are in the book. One about a motel visit that went awry for me and my buddies during WrestleMania in Florida. But I thought, these are some pretty cool stories, and they're funny and they're enlightening. So I'm like, there's got to be other fans out there who have stories that are even more, if not outlandish, more entertaining and, interesting. So I just kind of started asking around on internet sites and things like that. And I actually had two already in mind that I was going to try for, Derek Baker being one of those and Izzy Moreno being another one, just because I had listened to Izzy on Busted Open several times when she was younger. And I found that completely fascinating that a young, 11, 12-year-old girl would call in and know more about most of the fans who'd been lifelong fans. So I wanted to get in touch with her. And then with Derek being here in St. Louis, he had gathered quite a following, 3 million fans on Instagram and TikTok and all that with his Baker Banter tag. And I'd met Derek a couple times at live shows here in St. Louis. And when I was on the road for some of these shows, he would be there with his family. WWE and a couple other companies would bring them out because he was such a fan, and he'd get to meet with the wrestlers, and I'd watch Baker Banter and see him backstage interacting with Cody and CM Punk and John Cena. And I'm like, I got to tell Derek's story because I'm a big advocate for children with disabilities. Being an educator, that's one thing that I have always held to a higher standard. I always make sure to go out of my way to work with kids with autism and Down syndrome and things like that. So those were the two stories I knew I had to have. So that's, I ran it by some friends. I said, hey, what would you think about this idea? And they're like, well, we've never heard of anything like that before. And so it started with me telling my story. So I just sat down and started typing, and then I slowly started integrating these other stories from individuals who I'd interviewed. And, a few months into it, I had a book. So, it was a fun process. The writing part was the easiest part. Writing and interviewing for me I can do that in my sleep. So that was no problem. It was the whole promotion aspect of it at first. And, just putting the book together. I'd never formatted a book before. So going through the formatting process was a little bit of a challenge for me at first. But it all worked out, and it's going well.
It certainly did. Let me point out too, for those who may not know Izzy, longtime fan, and then she, sort of like Denise Salcedo, she became a fixture at press events. She was a reporter. She would interview. She'd be at AEW, WWE, etc. events, and now she's a wrestler. She's been wrestling several times on Thunder Rosa's Indy in San Antonio, Texas. I forget where her training was now, but very capable, getting to that point of being world-class wrestler, going through the drives. That's a remarkable story right there. Reason enough to get For the Love of the Show by Dr. Jeremy Housewright. Ev, let me throw to you, because this is the kind of stuff that we love to hear about. And if you look at fandom from Georgianne Macropolis in the 50s running fan clubs and then becoming a PowerPoint person she had like Vince McMahon on speed dial, Shawn Michaels later on in the 80s, or Diane Devine, also from the 50s, still with us, who was known as Miss St. Louis. She would help Larry Matysek with the program and the mailings and all of that, just looking at St. Louis. So Ev, let me throw to you. Fans are important. There would obviously be no business without the fans.
So let me ask you a tough question, because Jeremy's a legitimate journalist. What is the line between a fan, for example, somebody that goes out and supports the local indies and buys a ticket and hypes them on social media, and isn't making a living from it, but simply loves it? And so what is the line between a fan and somebody who's a quote unquote shill? I watched some of these press scrums, and 95% of the questions are softball questions. I mean, if I was at a press scrum, I would say something like, hey, instead of bragging about record-breaking gates, why don't you do something to support the legends who die needing a GoFundMe? You know, to me, that would be a question a journalist would ask, instead of, you know, a fawning, you know, yes man or whatnot, which is the bulk of what I see at these press scrums.
Sure.
What's your take on that?
That's a good question, and that's something that I talk to some friends about quite often because, you know, I have a number of friends who do their own podcasts, and they want to be involved with, you know, like right now here in St. Louis, the big thing is the Battlehawks football team for the UFL, former XFL. And I got some buddies heavily involved with that, and they get upset because they don't get approved for media passes. And my whole thing is I try to explain this to them. They're not journalists. They didn't go to college. They don't have a degree in journalism. So they, in my eyes, they cannot call themselves journalists. They don't understand how to you know, one thing that I always make sure to do when I'm in an event, I always wear a collared shirt. I always, you know, or a tie. I always look professional. And you hit it right on the head with the scrums at the end of the shows. I've been in a few. Some of these guys show up in shorts and a t-shirt and look like they just rolled out of bed or got picked up off the street. And I look at these guys and I'm thinking, you guys aren't real journalists. You're fans. And again, there's a time and a place for fans to ask questions, but the thing that I hate to see is a lot of these companies are letting in, you know, the quote fans who do a podcast in their basement or they go around videotaping people on their phones or wait for the wrestlers in the airports and try to get them in the airports and talk to them. And they think they're a journalist. That aggravates the hell out of me. I can't, you know, so for me, you know, you can tell right away who's a professional and who's not. You just can, you know, and that's the one thing I still respect about the major sports. Even UFC, for the most part, they don't let fans in. You have to have a legit magazine or newspaper backing you. And I'm not saying everyone's going to have a journalism degree. I can understand that there's people who may have went to school to be architects and then they love to write. They're talented at writing. Hey, more power to them. I can work with that. But I see a lot of these guys, like you said, who will just show up and they ask these softball questions because they're, you know, in my eyes, just kind of kissing the rear end of the company so they can keep getting those passes over and over and over.
That's what I was going to say. And when I have been to, you know, the majors in wrestling, but also UFC, Bellator, and boxing events, and they aren't kissing the ass of the promoters or by and large, the UFC ones, they weren't kissing Dana White's ass, asking softballs because they know they'll still be allowed back and that he respects a give and take. Versus in wrestling often, and these are even bigwig people, they don't want to ruffle feathers because it's a worked industry, you know, some kind of weird mentality there because it is worked. To, you know, oh gosh, if I ask this question or if I ask a Vince question, they won't allow me back. I won't be credentialed again. But it's not that way in legitimate sports. I wish it was more that way as Evan's describing it, and you are.
Yeah. You know, the one time and I was thinking back to the last press conference WWE just had after Royal Rumble, where Nick Hausman asked a Vince question. And I was waiting for the email all weekend. Please don't ask questions about Vince. I was waiting for it because I won't say what event, but there have been events I've been to or when I'm getting ready to interview wrestlers and I get a phone call, please don't ask this, this, and this. Okay. I don't necessarily agree with it, but you told me not to ask. I'll respect those wishes. And most of, you know, and I'll be honest, the last time it happened was with, I was interviewing, big guy for WWE. He just got released, real big, tall, former football player guy, AJ Francis. I believe that's his name.
Oh, right. Yeah.
he was doing an interview with me, and this was right after Swerve Strickland left WWE. And I got a phone call saying, please don't ask any questions about Swerve. Well, I really wasn't going to. I mean, that had nothing to do with what I was going to talk to him about anyway. I was there to promote the upcoming show. I wasn't worried about Swerve leaving. If it were to come up again, I would definitely ask about Swerve, because I think that's one of the WWE's biggest miscues in the last year, is letting him walk and not bringing him back. So yeah, there's a fine line there, and it's getting harder to see that line, because when I go to these events, a lot of the quote unquote journalists are fans, or they're media people from that city who know nothing about the product. And I've seen a lot of that too. When I was in Detroit covering SummerSlam, the guy next to me, great guy, I still keep in touch with him. It was the first wrestling event he'd been to in years, and he knew really nothing about what was going on. So I was kind of filling him in on everything, explaining to him what was going on. But, so you see that as well. But they're there to do their job. That's what they've been assigned to do by their outlet. So I fully respect that. But yeah, when you run into the guys who are just there kind of moonlighting as press, that does eat at me pretty bad, because it's like, I've paid my dues for 22 years now as a journalist. I'm not going to let some moron who, walks around with his GoPro and thinks he's, the next Howard Stern, get in front of me and, one, ruin my shot, or, keep me from asking a question. So yeah, there is a fine line, and it's getting harder and harder to see.
I'll take it another step. A lot of quote unquote wrestling journalists are not great writers. It's all about the scoops, and it's all about the bombardment of information and the minutia. I'm older than you, and I grew up on great sports writers like Dick Young, guys like that, Red Smith. They're before your time, but these guys, Roberto Clemente went down in a plane crash, and they'll make you cry with their writing. As opposed to, they know every title history in WWE, and it's a bombardment of information. So I think the average wrestling fan doesn't even grasp what is good writing.
No. And that's the thing. Nowadays, the majority of your wrestling journalists don't even write. It's podcasting and videos. And I have one buddy out from Vegas who, and I'll mention his name, Adrian Hernandez, Heavyweight Hernandez. He does a hell of a job. And I ran into him in Detroit, and we've stayed in touch since. And he's not scared to ask wrestlers certain questions. He did a great interview with Eddie Kingston, one of my favorite guys, where he talked to Eddie, not even about wrestling a whole lot, more about depression, because Eddie's made it very public that he suffers from, depression. And a lot of the interview was about that. And I respect the hell out of journalists when they do something like that, because you can find out information about any wrestler you want just by going on the internet and Googling and all that. So why not ask some questions that people don't know? Find out about their personal life a little bit, because people are interested in that. So yeah, I think I admire those journalists still today, and there's not many of them left. You're right. I think Bill Apter's still one of my favorite. I run into Bill quite a bit at the shows, and I enjoy talking to him. But yeah, there's a lot of it's young guys who I think just want to make a name for themselves by finding out leaking a big headline that isn't supposed to be talked about, leaking a return, or inner workings going on in the company, turmoil and things like that. Your Meltzers and guys like that.
Spoilers, which ruin it for everybody. And I better, Jeremy, warn you, my old editor for a jillion years, Bill Apter, if he drags you to listen to him sing karaoke at the karaoke bar in St. Louis or wherever you go.
He's going to do that.
Yeah, definitely.
I have a question for you, and that is, really, St. Louis stands out as one of the great wrestling territories. What do you think makes St. Louis stand out in particular versus the other great wrestling territories?
You know, it's hard these days let me say this. I look at St. Louis as a very historic wrestling town. These days, with the newer generation, they don't realize that. Of course, wrestling at the Chase is the big thing. I can remember years ago, even when I was a little kid, hearing about Ric Flair driving around downtown St. Louis late at night in his purple Cadillac, looking for a party or looking for women or, whatever he was doing. I can remember the wrestlers when they would stop here in town for a show on a Friday or Saturday night, would all go over to Sauget, to the Oz, or to Pops. And I remember this is probably when I was like 7, 8 years old. There was a big brawl there one night. Mr. Perfect was involved with it. A bunch of wrestlers got in a fight with, the everyday crowd that was in there because they found out they were pro wrestlers. So these drunkards wanted to throw down with Kurt Hennig and a bunch of other guys, and the police showed up, and it made the newspapers and everything. But nowadays, this younger generation, I don't think they have the respect for the older wrestlers that paved the way. Ric Flair is turned into more of a joke now than anything. And I hate to say it, but he does it to himself. He's just for better or worse, he's kind of just whoring himself out to whoever will pay him. Because he blew through his money so bad. But so as older wrestlers, the fans in St. Louis, they know Ric Flair, but they don't understand that he used to be at Wrestling at the Chase. They don't know who a Gorgeous George is. They're lucky if they know who Bruiser Brody is. And, thank God for Herb Simmons keeping his memory alive for wrestling fans to, be able to see some of those old Wrestling at the Chase matches and things like that. So, a lot of the younger fans, they don't realize that. And I think that's cost St. Louis a little bit, because nowadays when you talk about great wrestling cities, you hear Chicago, you hear, Philadelphia,
obviously,
New York, the Garden, obviously, you don't hear St. Louis anymore. And that's a shame, because St. Louis really was a hotbed for pro wrestling.
But that was because of Munchnick. You and I had that conversation, and I was lucky enough to have shot at Wrestling at the Chase. I saw the weirdest Ox Baker versus Baron von Raschke heel right on Sam's TV, but the Kiel Auditorium. So Sam, a celebrated baseball writer, had legit credentials, and Evan remembers this. Evan, remember all of the people from the St. Louis newspaper agency? They came out. St. Louis was not just a great wrestling town, but it's always been a great sports town.
Yeah, I think that has a lot to do with it.
Yeah. One of the greatest, truly. Chicago in there too for U.S. stuff. But I remember at the Chase Bar, I guess it was right after the show was over. Heenan is holding court. There's Dick the Bruiser, Bobo Brazil, Ray Stevens, Nick Bockwinkel, Pat O'Connor, just a plethora of talent, Jack Briscoe, all of this stuff. I saw one of the greatest tag team matches ever. It was Wrestling at the Chase, right on free TV. Funk Brothers against Jack Briscoe, Gene Kiniski. So you have all of this stuff. And St. Louis, even more so than Eddie Graham's Florida territory, was far more athletic, legitimate, shoot-looking. That was what we had that was akin to Japan, 60s, 70s, etc., because of Sam Munchnick. And it was like Japan, but for America. It was ultimate prestige goal to come to work on a Kiel Auditorium card for Sam, as has been for decades in Japan. Only the best of the best guests asked there, similar to that, because of Sam Munchnick. His credibility as the NWA president, right-hand guy working hand-in-hand with Thez. Herb Simmons comes along in that line, working with Larry Matisick, who was Sam's number one guy, etc. But St. Louis is a great all-around sports town, which was weird because when our Rams went there with that nut job, Georgia Fronteri, wasn't she Jack Kent Cook's last wife? Was that what the deal was? Because Jack Kent Cook owned the LA Fabulous Forum. Yes. He owned the Lakers. He owned the Kings hockey team. Went there for a billion games, and He even partnered with Vern Gagne going in a wrestling effort that failed after 3 shows in 1969, going against the LaBelle NWA, where Sam Muchnick sent in talent from every other territory. Opening match on one of those shows was Ray Stevens, Pat Patterson against King Curtis Iakia and Don Leo Jonathan. Opening match. Main event, Neil Moskowitz against Dory Funk Jr. for the NWA title. Blassie was on the show, etc. So, but that brings in the fans too. And in the territory days, every territory, the fans were different. You could feel different. Detroit fans different than Memphis fans, different than St. Louis, different than Montreal or Toronto or Winnipeg fans, etc., or Mexico City fans. Are you seeing that as you travel around now, that fans may be unique in particular cities, or are they getting more homogenized?
I would say, for the most part, when it comes to WWE, they're very homogenized. Now, I will also say that when I was in New York for WrestleMania 35 weekend, I attended several different shows, including the Ring of Honor New Japan show at the Garden, which was a fantastic. That was the first time I'd ever been in the Garden in my life. I'd been by it and several times, but I'd never been to a show there. And so for me, that was a treat. And those fans were totally different than WWE fans. Now, you had a few WWE fans there, but you could definitely tell the difference between a New Japan Wrestling fan and a WWE fan. You can tell the difference between an AEW fan and a WWE fan still, I feel like. And I feel like AEW fans are more into the history, more into seeing great physical matches, where your WWE fans are there for entertainment. They like the comedy to go along with it, where you go to an AEW show, you're going to see a lot more wrestling, I feel.
Exactly. And I don't think AEW or New Japan fans or more pure fans, respectful and tuning into the action part and the moves and like the Hechicero. I bring that up again because that's one of the best matches I've seen this year already. Holds and counter holds, and I love how AEW, the way Mike Tenay used to do in the 90s, is educating fans on that submission style from Mexico, and versus WWE fans for the last couple of decades. The big pop is to the entrances, and it's more superficial stuff as opposed to, the product that Tony is presenting. But the fans, or do you feel like in Tony's case? I think sometimes, I'm just guessing, that he listens too much to the fans swaying his booking, whereas WWE, they are Vince's thing. Now it's different with Hunter, but Vince's whole thing was sort of almost forcing the fans to think along your mindset, like, hey, this is the product we're going to present to them, and they're going to like it. They're going to take it and like it.
Yeah, I look at, first of all, it's hard for me to watch AEW right now because I have a hard time liking what Tony Khan's done to the company. I feel like he is a fan who doesn't know how to run a company, and I think he kind of lets the inmates run the asylum a little bit. And that's hurt them a lot. I can remember when that company first came about, 5 years ago or whatever it was hot. I mean, it was one of the hottest things in wrestling I've seen in my lifetime. And I'm 42. And it quickly went away because I feel like he just kind of let the wrestlers do what they wanted, Omega and the Bucks. And there's a difference, I call it flippy floppy wrestling, a lot of spots, high flyers, but there has to be a reason to do some of these high flying moves. Like if you're going to jump off the top turnbuckle onto a table, there better be a damn good reason to do it rather than just, we're going to do it just to do it. Like, I watched Sting, who, I grew up loving Sting, and I watch him now as a 63-year-old man. Why in the hell is he going through a table from the top rope? And Tony Khan's answer is, well, That's what Sting wants to do. No, you're the boss of this company.
Right.
You tell him.
Get a professional. Wait, Serena Deeb's match last night was technical expertise. Evan, I don't know, did you watch last night or tape it? Because you got to see.
No, I didn't see it last night.
You got to see Serena Deeb. She is like the modern day Thez or June Byers or Mildred Burke for the women, and or whatever your pronoun is. That was incredible too. Each match was great, and then Tony needs to. I think it would behoove him to just get a booker and focus on. I don't know how he can do all that on the Jaguars.
Yeah, I mean, but then I look at the WWE. For years, they pushed Roman Reigns down our throats, and fans hated it. They hated Roman, and he was supposed to be a face, but they got tired of him getting pushed down our throats and wearing the ridiculous bulletproof vest looking thing to the ring all the time. It's like, come on, give us something original. And I'll never forget the night he came out after they had put the belt on him, and he came out and he just turned on the fans and told them how much they suck and they've never supported them. I loved it. I immediately turned. I'm like, this is the Roman Reigns we want. This is who we need. And he's not the best worker. I'm not saying that, but he is one of the top guys in the company.
He does the hits.
Yeah, and that's all he has to do. But
it's a good memory to remember when Roman Reigns was last in the ring. That's the problem, is that you have to remember what his style is like, because it's been 8 months since he got in the ring last.
People reminded me it may be because of leukemia that he is.
Yes, and I always defend him. I always defend him for that.
But then take the belt off of him. If he can't wrestle because of the leukemia, get the belt on someone that can fight. And defend more often.
Right now they're in hot water because for a year we've been building up Cody Rhodes, Roman, the second match at this year's Mania. And I'll tell you, I'm a huge fan of The Rock. Growing up, that was my guy when I was in high school. And I think Dwayne Johnson you can't find any dirt on him. He's legit one of the nicest guys around. But the way he's doing it right now, I don't agree with. When he came out Friday night and it's just like Cody is just passing that main event to him, it's a slap in the face to Cody Rhodes, who is the face of the WWE right now. The fans love him. He can do no wrong. I just saw a video where a blind fan was in the audience with a sign saying they were here to see Cody. Cody got out of the ring and had the fan come up, and he signed autographs for him, took pictures with her. He is the guy in the company. And to do that, I was really shocked that The Rock would come in and do that, because The Rock knows how tough it is. I mean, his dad was well known. His grandfather was well known. The Rock, to me, should have the respect for Cody. I don't care, and I get it. It's going to be a huge payday for him. The WWE is going to make probably more money off that match than they've ever made.
Match with Roman in Australia, for example. And what was the whole point of Cody winning the Royal Rumble for the second time in a row?
That's
supposed to happen at WrestleMania, and he picked. But there may be outside stuff going on with CM Punk getting injured and Seth getting injured. So they.
Well, they're saying that this gets people to stop talking about Vince. That this is part of it.
And everything.
This is the #1 action star in the world, even though his last movie bombed. So, Black Adam. That's Russell's favorite movie.
I didn't hate it. It wasn't.
I did,
great, but I didn't hate it.
I did, but that's it. That's a different story for another show. But I do think that The Rock is trying to look at a way to pump up his image, because the Young Rock just got canceled. Black Adam wasn't so hot.
It's on the board. He's overseeing WWE, so maybe that was the bone they threw at him. But they could have held that off, as I said, to another pay-per-view or the huge event that's going to be in Australia, where.
But it's pretty obvious that The Rock isn't going to become champion, so we're going to get stuck. Right. We're going to get stuck with another 8 or 9 months.
It could happen. They could end up. It could Still have a few more weeks. You remember Rock on that radio show, whoever show it was, Stephen Smith, I think it was, where he likes long story build. Well, I don't think this is a long one, but you could have a three-way Rock, Roman, and Cody.
Well,
they still have time to do that with the next pay-per-view.
You know, Friday night when Cody said he knows Roman better than Roman knows himself or something like that, I think they're going to change it up and have The Rock be the guest referee. And they're going to, because Roman, they'll do the contract signing. Roman's going to come out because he's so cocky. He'll just sign the contract, throw it back at him. And then all of a sudden, Rock's going to be like, oh, by the way, WrestleMania night number 1, you're fighting Cody. I'm the guest ref. Night 2, it's me and you. He drops the belt to Cody night 1. Him and The Rock go night 2. Problem solved.
Yeah, at that point, you wouldn't have the title. You'd have Cody get the title on night 1.
Or a 3-man match.
You could. Please, no. I don't think Cody's going to hold on to the belt, though. I really think that they're going to have Damian Priest, or I still refer to him as Punishment Martinez from Ring of Honor. I think they're going to have him cash in on Cody. Because WWE has a history of if they, if you came from another company or leave them and come back, it takes them sometimes a little while to put a title on you. And I think they'll let Cody win it, but I wouldn't be surprised if Priest cashes in that same night or that Monday Night Raw right after. Because I think that would be a great feud. Seeing Cody and Damian Priest. I like Damian Priest. I think he's built for the WWE. He's the perfect guy for them. But I also think Drew McIntyre is as well. And I think
his contract's coming up, so you can bet he's going to be with the injuries. He's going to be getting some good money. They should have signed him a while. We only have a few minutes left, guys. Let's let Jeremy plug For the Love of the Show. Pro Wrestling Fans Tell Their Stories by Dr. Jeremy Housewright. Jeremy, where do you want to send folks to get the book? And you're also already in the midst of, I think you started work on a sequel, which is going to be a big deal.
Yeah, so I just opened my website, jeremyhousewright.com. You can go there and order it from Amazon, or you can order one that's autographed by me, and I'll ship it out to you myself. Or you can go straight to Amazon or barnesandnoble.com. So, but yeah, I just opened the website Friday morning. I got it up and running. I developed it all myself. And what I've also put on there is a bunch of old interviews that I've done with wrestlers and musicians and things like that. Some of them are YouTube videos. Some of them are written pieces. But that's just a chance for people to kind of read some of my writing so they kind of know what they're getting into. And I have started the sequel. I wasn't going to. And after talking to several fans, I decided that I had enough stories and still wanted to add some. I was going to go ahead and do it. So I just completed my second interview Thursday night. And then tomorrow night, Raw is actually here in St. Louis. So I'll be over there, and I'm going to be doing some stuff pre-show to get ready for the next book, interviewing a couple people. And so and what's cool about the next one is I tell everybody it's, if you know anything about sequels, they're bigger, so it's going to be more stories. And I think it's going to be a better all around book, honestly. Now that I'm a little more confident in what I'm doing, there's a lot more people who have come out of the woodwork wanting to share stories. And some of the 2 stories I've already done interviews for, they literally tug at my heartstrings. They're very special. And so I can't wait to get going on it. My goal is to have the second book out by the end of the summer, probably like August is when I'm shooting for having the second one out. And it's and what's cool about this one is I'm actually going to be talking to some fans over in the UK. So it'll be worldwide instead of just, the United States. So I'm really looking forward.
How'd you get a hold of the fans in the UK?
So there's this web page on Facebook called Mania Club. And I joined it because, since I attend most of the Manias, I like to hear what people are saying in advance. And this one gentleman had posted that he posted a before picture and an after picture. He had lost a bunch of weight, and he started doing it through DDP yoga. And throughout the whole process, DDP would call him up and just talk to him and motivate him. And it wasn't paying him anything. This was just out of the goodness of DDP's heart. He's one of the good guys in the business. I've talked to DDP, and he's a great guy, and he really cares for his fans. And when I heard about this, as someone who's dealt with weight struggles my entire life, it really, I'm like, this is a great story. So that's going to be one of the stories. But yeah, this guy lives over in England, so we're going to be talking Friday during the day here, and I'll get his story, and then we got a bunch of other ones coming up with kids, and I'm gonna try to incorporate a lot more kids into this one because there's some really cool things, especially out in New York. There's a group called the Wrestling Club. They're going to be featured in the book. It's a 7th, 8th grade teacher who actually started this club for his students. They get together every day after school and on lunch, and they watch wrestling and they study wrestling. And they've actually had several wrestlers, Mark Henry, Swerve Strickland, Sasha Banks, come and visit with the class. And Cody actually just told them that he was going to pay their way to WrestleMania 40. So I'm hoping at WrestleMania 40 that I can get a little time with Cody to talk to him about the kids, and that way I can put it in my book, because this first book I actually had, what's his name? He's in AEW. He used to be buddies with CM Punk, not anymore. But Colt talked to me about Derek. So, I included that. So yeah, I'm hoping I can get a little time with Cody, and I think I'll be able to. Cody's always very gracious, talking about fans and working with the fans. So that's going to be something I'm looking forward to. But yeah, there's going to be a lot more things in the book, hopefully about, younger fans. And then, we'll probably have, I had 6 stories in this time. My goal for the next book is to have, because mine's already been told, so that's half the book that I'm gonna have to fill. So I'm aiming for between 12 and 15 fans to talk to, and probably a couple more photos, because that's the one thing that people commented on. They really like to see the actual people. I put a photo from each person in the book toward the end, and they really enjoyed that aspect of it. So I'm gonna have maybe a few more photos of the fans as well in the next one.
Jeremy, we got to go, but what socials are you on? Are you on all the socials?
I'm on Facebook under JM Housewright, Instagram, Dr. Jeremy Housewright, and then Twitter or X, Heinous J, HEINOUSJ.
And then last thing, Evan, there's that fan that WWE, you probably know, on Peacock, they did a tribute video to, or a video.
Yes.
He's in ill health right now. That might be, if you haven't already interviewed him, he's well.
I have not. I'd love to.
He's a major guy. Dr. Jeremy Housewright, again, the book for the love of the show. Pro wrestling fans tell their stories. He's just opened up jeremyhousewright.com. Go to Amazon as well as Barnes & Noble. Jeremy, thank you so much, guys. Ev, anything else to add? I don't know. Who are you?
Yes, please check out Evan Ginsberg's Old School Wrestling Memories on Facebook. 50 years of memories of attending wrestling. And also I'm the senior editor over at ProWrestlingStories.com. We have 900 or so articles on wrestling's rich history. Dr. Mike and myself will be putting out a John Tolos
Golden Greek.
Yeah, the Golden Greek. That's going to be out this year. And hopefully my book, I have a 100-story book coming out. Wrestling rings, blackboards, and movie sets. And I'm doing the final edit on that as of now. So we'll get some stories out there too, hopefully. And Russ, what do you want to
you've been a delightful guest, and I'm hoping that you are absolutely crushed next week as the 49ers win 174 to nothing. So
that's against Pat Mahomes. Come on now, you know better.
All right, thank you so much, and we'll get you a link out to you for shortly for the
Thanks,
program.
Jeremy.
Thanks, everyone. See y'all next week. Good night, everyone.